So why don't we jump into it? So we were just talking off air, and you are in your first year in this journey of building your listing agent business through the outbound prospecting lead generation methodology. So just for context for the audience, just give people, like, bring people up to speed. You know, how long you've been licensed, and maybe some of the things that you tried before you and I started working together and implementing an outbound prospecting methodology.
Yeah, so I got my license, I believe it was at the very beginning of 2022. In fact, funny note on that, I bought our house at the end of 2021 with a different realtor, and then bought and finished my license at the beginning of 2022. And so it was kind of fun to see that whole transaction as I was getting my license. But I really wouldn't say that I was a real estate agent even in 2022. I was doing it part time. I did a couple transactions with buyers, but I wasn't, considered like a real estate agent, I don't think. In 2023 was when I started doing it full time. I've always wanted to do real estate. And so I dove in, I made it a goal to like quit my job at the end of 2022, January 1st, 2023. I started doing real estate full time. And that last year, was kind of crazy. I mean, a lot of it was just like not knowing, what to do. So trying all these different things. My broker had a couple different trainings with like Brian Buffini, things like that. And so for anybody that knows what Brian Buffini is, it's just like a very much focused on the referrals and things like that, which works for a lot of people. But for me, it didn't work great. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I tried a bunch of different things and nothing really stuck. I just felt like I wasn't ever doing enough volume or actually talking to enough people to actually get business. And ultimately, you've talked about this before. I felt like I was just sitting there waiting for business to come to me, which isn't a business strategy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty
It's
much it.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of newer real estate agents would probably resonate with feeling the exact same way that you had felt, right? And so
Yeah.
um, now you're on the other end of the spectrum, and in an outbound sales prospecting method that you're teaching, or that I'm teaching you, which has its own challenges, right? Because you went from being completely passive, right? It's not to take anything away from any other tactics or strategies, but it was all passive waiting, right? Now we have you playing offense, where you're taking massive action on a daily basis. And that's what I want to talk about today, because everybody has heard about, well, if I'm going to be in direct sales, I probably have to prospect at some times. And people have mystified what it is and what it is not. And I wanted to have you on the show specifically because you're just really starting to get traction. And I think it's a really good conversation about the challenges that you're faced with, the successes that you have, and the learnings along the way. All right. So when did you and I actually get started?
So I believe we got started in like October or something, September, October.
Yeah.
And then, those first couple weeks, I was just going through the certification process, learning as much as I could. The difference between working with you is I just felt so in sync with what you were teaching that I would watch your certification videos and then immediately go and take action. I would make calls, and I feel like that was the quickest way for me to learn, was rather than like waiting until the full certification was done. I just took action as I was learning. That's how I did it, at least. And that served me well. I remember November was the first prospecting challenge that we did, and it was good. That was like the first time that I really did calls on a consistent basis over those 3 days. And I just called all day, and I only set 4 appointments. So it wasn't like a super huge amount, but it was 4 appointments that I'd literally never been on. Like those were my first 4 appointments.
Mm.
So I learned a lot those couple days, and I made it my goal. Like, hey, next time this prospecting challenge comes around, I'm going to be on another level. And so that's kind of been my goal now.
Yeah. So, and we're going to talk about what happened in our second prospecting challenge that we just got through, right? And we're going to talk about that in a second. But you said something interesting. You said it was the first time I had ever made calls in your life, right? Like sales or not, other job or not, like you're new to direct outbound sales, correct?
Kind of, I mean, yes, in a way. I did serve a mission for my church for 2 years. And so that, I mean, all day, every day, I was knocking doors and things like that,
Mhm.
more sharing like a gospel, right? Not necessarily sales, but there's a lot of things, a lot of skills that transferred over for sure, like handling rejection and things like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. We're
yeah,
just,
definitely. Yeah, I've never made, I had up until this point, I never made like a cold call or anything like that.
yeah. And so let me just ask you that before we even get into the weeds of things. I think that there are so many distractions for new agents coming in to say, do this, do that. You should be doing that. Don't do that. Um, I know you talked about Buffini and the whole business by referral thing. None of that led you to appointments, but this methodology that so many people have this feeling towards, and a lot of people have a negative feeling towards, well, that's old school. You picking up the phone and just reaching out to people direct, but it's getting you results. Is there any part of you that has any doubt that not, with all the distractions out there, that you could get the same results doing something different than you're getting with direct outbound prospecting right now in your real estate business?
Great question. No, I don't think there is, and I'll say why. I was actually just reading a book last night. I think you know him, Alex Hormozy.
Yeah.
He was talking about. I'm in the chapter right now where he's talking about cold outreach, and he talked about how one of the benefits of cold outreach is that you can control who you're calling, right? So, like if you do inbound generation, I mean, you can try and narrow down like who's coming, who's landing on your page or whatnot. But ultimately, I can pull a list of absentee owners, expired listings, people that I know have raised their hand saying they want to sell. And as long as the data is accurate, like I can expect to talk to people that do want to sell their home or at least wanted to recently.
Yeah.
And that's super powerful for somebody that has nothing set up for themselves. I don't have a big sphere of influence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's more control, really.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like pinpointing this finite amount of energy and focus and putting it directly like a magnifying glass that you're using the sun to put on one spot, and you're focusing all of your energy on this activity of talking to homeowners that have a high likelihood of selling, which gets you directly in production versus any other passive approach where you just don't have any control. So let's get into the weeds of it. Okay. So, let's talk about the last prospecting challenge, and then we'll bring that up to current day. You made a really good post in our group talking about some of the things that you learned and some of the results that you got. Let me just kind of start that off. So bring your mind back to the post, and I'll get the audience up to speed. This was, I don't know, a couple weeks ago you posted this. You said, these are your prospecting stats for 2 days. For 2 days, you had 15 hours of dial time. You made just over 2,000 calls. You spoke with 150 people.
Yep.
You generated 15 seller leads. You set 11 appointments. You had 4 appointments met, and you took 2 listings. And so we're talking about in 2 days, the audience looks at that and says, well, that looks like a production for an entire year for most agents. I mean, no joking aside, I mean, truly, I mean, most agents, 50% of all licensed real estate agents sold one house or less last year, 50%. And the vast majority are selling 4. You were able to do this in 2 days. Tell us how.
Yeah.
Let's break down the post and what you've learned and what's going on.
Yeah. So again, I mean, I kind of talk about it in the post, but the biggest takeaway, I guess, would just be volume. And so for anybody that's wanting to be successful at outbound prospecting, is you need a lot of volume. When you first start, it can kind of be discouraging. You think that like, oh, I'm calling all these numbers, a bunch of them are the wrong number, or maybe, I only get a couple pick up an hour. But the reality is like that's most people. Most people you're going to talk to are the wrong number, and that's okay. Once you realize that that's okay, then you just keep making your calls and you start to see results, right? And so I guess that would be the biggest thing, is like the difference between prospecting challenge 1 and prospecting challenge 2 is that I just had a lot more context. I knew what to expect. I knew that I would have to talk to a lot of people in order to get those appointments. I think there was also definitely, I had gotten better at, asking for appointments and things like that on the phone. And that just came with time, just came with practice.
And we're going to talk about the skills in a second. I want to break that down. So volume, you're exactly
Mm-hmm.
right. When I'm coaching an agent, right, I look at, typically that's where the problem lies. It isn't anything else. It's just that we don't even have enough volume of conversations to put ourselves in a position to even win. So like, let's give volume some context, right? So you don't prospect the way you prospected in that challenge. Of course, you're not going to prospect 7, 8, 9 hours a day. What does the average day look like for you just in your everyday working life right now?
Yeah. So the goal, it's tricky right now. We just have a newborn, so we're trying to adjust to life, honestly. But the goal for me is to prospect 2 to 3 hours minimum, ideally 3 hours. I want to get 20 to 30 contacts a day. And these are just numbers that we talk about in our group quite often. You kind of need to do those amount of contacts every day for, I think you say like 6 months or something like that before you can expect to see results, right?
Yep.
And then, yeah, so that's what my day looks like from 8 a.m. to 11, pretty much is my prospecting time. And then after that, I'm following up and uh, hopping on trainings with you, and then just like taking care of current clients after that. And that's pretty much it. I should say, like, before I start prospecting at 8 a.m., I do look at my numbers every single day. And so I think that's important because I also go to the gym. And one thing that I realized recently was if I want to improve my weight or my muscle mass or whatever, it needs to be tracked, right? And so the same thing comes to prospecting. If you want to improve on your ratios, like how many people you're getting to accept appointments, things like that, like you need to track that and know what those numbers are off the top of your head. And so I check that every day. And yeah, so
What gets measured gets improved. I mean, you're 100% spot on. I mean, if you want to lose weight, you're going to track your calories, and you'll see
yeah,
tracking everything you put in your mouth. If you want to save money, track what you spend. You will spend less money for sure. And so you want
exactly.
to get good at outbound sales, then track your numbers, track your ratios. And so, what are you using Sisu to track, or what are you using to track?
Yeah, I am using Sisu. I have it pulled up right here if you want me to read
Yeah,
off my ratios.
yeah,
So for context for everyone, like I'm still improving. These ratios, some of them aren't even at what I'm supposed to be at for, you know,
baseline
excellence, I
conversions.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But so my listing appointment set to Met is 41%. I'd
Okay.
like to see that go up to 50% or higher for sure. My met to signed ratio is 23%. So that's where I definitely need to improve on my listing presentation, right?
Yep.
And I think I've learned recently, you've been sharing with me a lot, that I need to improve on disqualifying as well, making sure that those appointments I'm going on are really high quality appointments.
Yeah. So
But
can we break down your numbers from February, just the full month's numbers?
yes,
So
let me
while you pull
pull
that
February.
up, yep, no worries. We'll start at the top just to kind of break this entire thing down. Just so I think this will be really helpful for agents that are just getting started in their prospecting efforts. Let me know when you have that pulled up. But how many conversations did you have in the month of February?
Okay, perfect. So I had 185 conversations. And again, that was way lower than it needed to be. So even like what I say, where volume is needed, like these are things that I need to work on myself, right?
That's right.
Um,
Because let me just give the audience context. Like where this is, you and I were just talking about, okay, which coaching
yes,
call do I need you on? You're going to be in the level 4 coaching call. One of the first things we're going to really focus on is volume. Your volume should be at 600.
yeah. And to give context, I think Brandon said this already, but I made 150 of those in 2 days. So like the fact that I only made 35 conversations after that, the rest of the month is bad. Like that's where I need to again, like trying to give myself a little bit of grace because we are in
Sure.
this transition period. But at the same time, like if I'm not able to make those contacts first thing in the morning, then I need to move them later in the day. Got to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So,
185 conversations now. So that's your volume. So what
yep.
happened as a result of that volume?
So
How
I
many
set 12
leads?
lists. Oh, leads. Hold on.
Yep, just scroll
So
down
I
a
got
little bit.
19 leads.
Okay. And how do we qualify or quantify a lead so that the audience understands the 19 leads in 1 month? I mean,
Yeah.
agents would love that. I mean, you're not buying these, you're generating these through your effort and your skills, right? Via the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lead is somebody where you ask for the appointment. So you're talking with them on the phone. You see if it even makes sense for you to meet with them. If it does, you ask for the appointment and, set up a time. If they say no, then I just ask them if it ever makes sense for us to meet. And if it does, when that timeline would be. And then I collect their email and stay in contact with them. So that's a lead. They
Love it.
had to have rejected my appointment and said that they do want me to keep in touch with them.
Yeah, makes total sense. Okay. So sorry, I digress. You get 185 conversations, 19 leads. So that ratio, let's just look at that, right? So you probably have it in front of you before I can do it, but yeah, that's right on lockstep. So it's 10% conversion from the conversations you have with a human being, and that turning into an actual lead is 10%, right? So that's right,
Yeah.
right on par. How many appointments set for the month?
12.
12. So
Yep.
that's really good because so 12 divided by 19. So your appointment set, or your lead to appointment set ratio, I don't know if you have that in front of you. What do you have yourself at right there?
So Sisu doesn't tell me it, but I could do the math real quick. 12
I have
divided
it right now.
by
Yeah,
19,
63%.
63. Yeah.
That's really good conversion because let's just take a moment and talk about the importance, and you've probably learned this too, the importance between getting so focused on like first contact itis, as I would call it, versus like lead follow up, where the vast majority of your appointments are coming via follow up. Is that true?
Uh, maybe that's where I need to improve is like a lot of my appointments are coming from first contact.
That makes
Um,
sense, actually. Now I think about it, because
yeah.
in your prospecting challenge of all those contacts, right? And so that's where a lot of the appointments came from because you don't have a pipeline.
Yeah. Well, I do kind of, but yeah, not the pipeline I want. So,
Yeah, not the pipeline yet that's matured to the.
yeah.
If we do this in 6 months from now, and you have
Yeah.
a pipeline that's matured, you'll find that that's how you actually scale the business. That's just a little coaching opportunity. That whatever you're setting right now is literally a byproduct of the time you spend making first contacts. That will be different in 6 months from now, where a lot of your appointments will come from the work you're doing right now, right? January, February, March, and April. May, June, July's appointments will come from the contacts you made in the first quarter, right? And it's this 90-day turnover of your pipeline. So how many did you
Yep.
use at 12? How many did you meet?
I'm at 6, so exactly 50%.
And then you took two, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I love it. So not a bad month, right? You took two listings in a month. Is that kind of what the trajectory looks like based on your numbers right now that you will continue to produce at?
Yeah, I think so. My goal is to take 1 to 2 listings a month, and I've taken 3 so far, right? So we're in March, that's the third month. Um, but I just got to keep going, right? Like I did great for 2 days. But I just need to make sure that that continues. And that's the stage I'm in.
Yeah, I love it.
So,
It's real. So let's just transition to the skills piece and what you've learned with having the conversations, because it's one thing to get to the point where you're making the calls, you're going through the process and doing all of that, which is awesome. That's volume. Well, the other part of the equation is skills, right? It's your volume times skills equals your results. What are maybe 2 or 3 things that you could share with the audience that have made the biggest impact with your skill set over the phone that allows you to generate leads and appointments?
yeah. So, um, I would say the biggest things that have made impact is one, just making the calls every day. Every day that So, okay, Alex Ramosi, again, to kind of quote him, he talks about when he talks about his journey of like finding happiness and stuff like that. He talks about how at one point in his life he realized that the best way to predict his happiness, or I guess ensure his happiness, is to track the things that make him feel good on a certain day and do those things for as long as possible in a row.
Hmm.
And so I really believe that. I think that when I first started prospecting, I felt like anyone, maybe a little reluctance to get on the phones. But you talked about this in your trainings a lot when I first started with you, is that, you want to get to the point where not making your calls is more painful than making the calls.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it has gotten to me at this point. If I don't make my phone calls, I feel like I wasn't productive that day. It turns into a bad day. And so the goal is, to answer your question, the things that have helped me improve my skill set is, one, making sure that I do make those calls every day, not only just role playing, like actually talking with live people, live prospects. Number two, I show up to all of the role play sessions that we do. So for context, on Tuesdays, we practice phone skills. And then on Thursdays, we practice presentation skills. And then I would say another skill that's been really important is you got to learn how to handle rejection and not get offended by it. Like you just need to move on to the next person. Like if somebody says, you know, to screw off or something like that, like just move to the next person. They're not the right client for you, and that's okay.
Yeah. I love it.
I don't know.
So,
Does that answer your question?
well, and I think I probably asked the wrong question. And no, that was all really helpful. I guess like if you could bring the audience with you on a call and they were, there's different skills, right? There's pattern interrupt, there's,
Oh
how
yeah.
there's ARPing, there's, hey, this is our framework for setting appointments. There is all these different things, these different specific skills that you've learned. Can you talk about some of those that has helped the
Yeah.
conversation itself get better?
Yes, absolutely. So the biggest recent one is really trying to communicate in a way that supports people's autonomy. And so to explain what that means for people listening, that just means that when you're talking with someone, most realtors that they're talking with they're on the phone trying to convince them that they need to work with them, that they need to meet with them. And I just try and propose things in a way that's more a Socratic style approach, where it's just, hey, if it makes sense for us to meet with each other, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay. Right. Using phrases like that to just really let people make their own decisions so they don't feel like they're being pressured into making one for them.
Spot on. And by doing that, have you found that it helps to lower people's resistance to these conversations that you're having?
Yes, absolutely. And I've been trying to take it even a step further recently, because you have really been teaching me that we need to not only support people's autonomy, but almost argue against our own best interests, right?
Can you speak to that for the
And
audience? Yeah, I love that.
yeah, so most realtors, they're gonna argue for change, is what we say often. So like, again, like I just said, they'll argue like, you need to sell your house. This is what you can sell it for. And I try and do the exact opposite, or at least I have been trying to. I'm improving on this. When I walk into a listing appointment, I say like, look, one of the first things I talk with them, and I'll say this on the phone too, but the first thing I say is like, look, now that I've seen the home, like I'm just surprised you're even wanting to sell it. Is there an option to just keep it? And I really try and spend a pretty good amount of time trying to convince them, quote unquote, almost not to work with me.
Yeah.
And that seems to lower people's resistance quite a bit. They seem to trust me more. And there's no longer this like, I find that they also talk more during the presentation too, right? Because
Yeah.
they feel comfortable to say whatever is on their mind.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, you're the only agent who is speaking to your point, right? We talk about it all the time in coaching sessions. It's like if you can position the conversation in a way that is for them and not for your benefit, then that is the way we build trust and rapport. And so many agents have, the needy commission breath, that it's this constant tug of war back and forth between them and the prospect, and they are dealing in constant resistance and pushback. So what's next for you? As you look ahead, obviously you've got the new baby, you've got a lot on your plate. What what would your goal look like moving forward? I know you talked about listing a property or two per month, which is
Yeah.
great. But as you really start to build this pipeline out, what does the goal look like?
Yeah. So a big takeaway for me has been, so you've talked about this, creating an environment to win. And so um, we talk a lot in our group about how you can't control the outcomes. All you can control is your input. And so my thought process here is I need to create an environment where it's as easy as possible for me to control those inputs, right?
Mm,
It's as easy as possible to make those calls. So whether that's just through an accountability of other people holding me accountable, or designing my daily schedule in a way where I can still balance the other things going on in my life, but still make work a priority, you know? That's my biggest focus right now. In terms of like measurable goals, I kind of mentioned already, I want to hit 20 contacts a day, an average of 100 over a week, right?
yeah.
I'd like to scale that up to 30, eventually hit that 600 a month that we've talked about. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, and I guess one of the ways that I'm really trying to improve my environment is I'm starting to implement. You used to talk about this. I don't know if we've talked about it recently, but I'm starting to. I have a sheet that I fill out every day. It's called my win the day sheet, and
Yep.
I track all the things that I need to do for that day to be successful, right? And so that's, anyways, those are just some things that I'm focusing on, I guess.
I love it. It's great, Dustin. So, last thing, right? So, an agent who's watching or listening to this is just getting started, and they're filled with fear. They're filled with overwhelm. They're filled with all the reasons on not getting started. What would one thing you would tell them that might help them get out of feeling stuck and get them into action? What would you say?
Um, I would say, honestly, so one thing that's really helped me is when I first started training with you, you kind of outlined like, look, there's two things that can happen in a day. You can either make your calls or you don't make your calls. If you don't make your calls, you don't get any leads, right? If you do make your calls, well, the fear probably is that, well, if I speak to somebody that doesn't want to talk to me, right? Or maybe the fear is, so I get somebody on the phone and I don't know what to say. Well, if that's the case, and let's just say that you are terrible on the phones, the worst case scenario is that you also don't get a lead, right? And so no matter what, you're not getting any leads. But one scenario where you are making phone calls, you're at least learning. And so I guess for me, at least, what has helped me not have fear getting on the phone call is just realizing that there's really nothing to lose. Like, it's not like I'm going to decrease my income by making phone calls. If
That's right.
anything, I'm going to increase, right?
Yep.
Even if they don't want to sell with me, I'm going to learn from that call.
Yep.
And so, but I have everything to lose if I don't make my calls. And
That's great
so just
advice.
thinking of it in that way.
Yeah, what a beautiful way to think about it, quite frankly, and it's interesting to hear you say that back to me and how impactful that is, because if the sum is both zero, but there's an upside to doing something, then you can look at it objectively and say, well, it makes just sense to do it. If both outcomes equal this zero, then I might as well get the reward for doing the thing anyways,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. And one more thing too, like so even though these are my first, honestly, 6 months of
Yeah,
doing cold outreach over the phone, I do feel like something that I've learned over the years is just make the first call or make the first door knock, right? People talk about this all the time, and it's really true. Once you make that first call or that first door knock, it's so much easier to just go to the next, right? And remove as much resistance as there is. So we didn't even talk about this, but like if you have a hard time making calls, I would recommend getting a dialer, right? Remove the resistance of you having to make and dial that phone number. Make it so easy once you've made that first call to just make the next one,
love it.
right? Um,
What are you using? Yeah, we didn't even talk about tools and resources, but what dialer and
yeah.
where do you get your data?
Yeah, so I'm using Mojo triple line. That was one of the big things going into the prospecting challenge, knowing that I needed to talk to more people. And so I got the triple line dialer to increase my contact rate.
And are you getting
Um,
data from them as well or from somewhere else?
yeah, I'm getting data from, so for my expired listings, I'm getting Mojo. I've tried other data sources too, and I've compared them all, and Mojo seems to be good in my market.
It's
So
great.
that's what I went with for that. And then for sale by owners, I get them from My Plus leads, and they go straight into my dialer.
Yeah. Well, listen, we went longer than I planned just because, I mean, I took a page of notes. I'm sure agents are very grateful for you to take the time. And so thank you for their behalf. And I'm excited just to see where you take this, truly, because it's so wonderful to work with someone as coachable as you who implements what it is that they're learning. Because just like we talked about in our last coaching call today, there's a lot of information junkies out there, right? And they don't
Mm-hmm.
execute and they trick themselves into believing that learning is being productive, but they never actually execute on the information. And so it's wonderful to work with someone such as yourself that actually executes. So thank you for that. Thank you for being coachable and appreciate you jumping on the podcast today.